Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Jared Goff. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge incoming Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Stephen Chappell and Mrs. Melissa Chappell. Warrant Officer of the Air Force, Warrant Officer Ralph Clifton and Mrs. Melissa Clifton. Chief of the Royal New Zealand Air Force, Air Vice Marshal Darren Webb. Former Acting United States Secretary for Defence, Colonel Chris Miller, and their accompanying delegations. We also warmly welcome Mr. Athol Morris, President of the ACT Jewish Community, Ms. Adele Rozalski, President of the ACT branch of the Australian Jewish Historical Society, one recruit training unit from the Royal Australian Air Force Base in Wagga Wagga, and the 2024 cohort of the Defence Cooperation Scholarship Program who are with us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Jamestown Community School from Jamestown, South Australia. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament. Flowers of the forest, wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Alexander Bennett. Born on the 21st of September 1914 in Perth, Alexander was the fourth and youngest son of Maxwell and Sarah Bennett. The couple of the Jewish faith had emigrated from England to Western Australia sometime around 1904. Maxwell, originally from Romania, soon became naturalised as a British subject, and the family name was legally changed from Burkhoff to Bennett. After the family moved to Melbourne, Alexander attended Caulfield Central School from 1925 to 1927, where he passed maths, English, physics and drawing. He next went to Caulfield Grammar School, graduating in 1929. For leisure, Alexander enjoyed tennis and swimming while working as an office clerk, a salesman and a shop assistant. He married Lydia Ellis in Melbourne on the 26th of February 1942. Their sons Rodney and Paul were born in 1943 and 1944. In January 1942, Alexander joined the Royal Australian Air Force Reserve. Then in June, he was called up. He joined as an aircraftman, Class 2, mustering as aircrew. He moved from station headquarters at Laverton to the initial training school at Summers, then on to No. 2 Air Observer School at Mount Gambier. He was promoted to leading aircraftman, continued training into 1943, first at No. 3 Bombing and Air Gunnery School at West Sale, then at No. 2 Air Navigation School, where he completed a navigator's course. Then it was time to head overseas. On May the 25th, 1943, Temporary Sergeant Alexander Bennett embarked in Sydney, arriving in the United Kingdom 6 weeks later. Now attached to the Royal Air Force, he was first posted to No. 9 Advanced Flying Unit, then in October to No. 30 Operational Training Unit. After other postings, on the 18th of May 1944, Bennett, now a flight sergeant, joined No. 148 Squadron RAF. 148 Squadron had been reformed on Malta in December 1940. When Bennett joined them, they had seen more than 2 years' service in the Mediterranean and North Africa. Now based at Brindisi on the heel of Italy, they had become a special duty squadron. This meant working closely with the Special Operations Executive, conducting clandestine missions to supply partisan groups throughout the Balkans and Poland. In addition, they performed regular bombing missions. Flying the 4-engined Halifax, Bennett's role among the 7-man crew was bomb aimer. During the summer of 1944, as the Western Allies landed in Normandy, on the Eastern Front, the Red Army had pushed the Germans back into Poland. By August, they had reached the River Vistula and the Polish capital, Warsaw. Sensing imminent relief, on the 1st of August, the Polish Resistance Home Army led an uprising in the city. Soviet forces, however, remained in place, advancing no further. This left the Poles dangerously exposed to a vengeful German army. On the 3rd of August, Warsaw called for urgent help from the Western Allies. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill ordered supply flights to begin at once. 205 Group, including No. 1586 Special Polish Duty Squadron, RAF numbers 178 and 148 squadrons, and numbers 31 and 34 squadrons of the South African Air Force would launch what would become known as the Warsaw Airlift. From southern Italy, the round trip would be some 2,800 kilometres. This was necessary because the Soviets would not allow them to land in their territory and would even shoot at them if they infringed. The alliance would always be temporary and tenuous. Inbound, they flew mostly in broad daylight, timed to reach Warsaw by dark. Only a small amount of supplies, food, medicine, weapons and ammunition, could be taken since they had to carry so much fuel. On reaching the Vistula, the aircrew could see an inferno glowing in the distance. Warsaw was burning. A day after Warsaw's call for help, the airlift's first sortie took off at 8 p.m, with the Polish squadron accompanied by 7 Halifaxes from No. 148 Squadron. Alexander Bennett was on board one of those, captained by Pilot Officer Charles Crabtree. After reaching Warsaw, this maiden sortie made partially successful drops over Krasinski Square and Wola, as well as Kampinos and Kabati forests, providing the Poles a boost more in morale than in material. On this mission, 5 aircraft were shot down, including Bennett's. Given the position of the crash site about 250 kilometres due south of the city, it is likely they were lost before reaching Warsaw. All 7 of the crew were killed and all were buried in the Rakowiecki Cemetery in Krakow. The Allied airlift continued for nearly 2 months, dropping over 200 tonnes of supplies, but much of it fell into German hands. 41 Allied aircraft and their crews were lost, a staggering 13.3%. Despite the aircrew's bravery, ultimately it was nowhere near enough to save the Polish resistance. They held out for 63 days in vain, desperately trying to liberate their capital while inflicting some 15,000 casualties on the Germans. Of the 40,000 men and women of the underground army, around 18,000 lost their lives, with many more wounded. Warsaw's civilian casualties were estimated as at least 180,000. The uprising stood out as a truly awful episode in a most terrible war. Alexander Bennett's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. He was 29. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Alexander Bennett, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.